All right, recording started. All right, everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So this is a convo I've been wanting to set up for a while now, just based on, general thoughts and discussions that I've seen going on in the One Piece community. So I really wanted to dive into the Wano arc of One Piece and kind of talk about thoughts and feelings on it because I feel like a majority of the fandom is pretty positive on the arc overall thus far. Even though I haven't seen that much discussion on it really on Twitter, but that might just be because I'm not really in those fandom circles anymore. But I kind of wanted to gauge other fans' opinions on the series and everything thus far. Kind of talk about it since we're, 60 chapters into the arc now. It's almost past half the length of Dressrosa. So I figure it's a good time to kind of dive in and talk about it. So with me today we have Nathan. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Nathan. My handle on Twitter is Church of Wolves. I'm not so much participant in anime Twitter so much. I'm just pretty much on the stream because I follow Ash here. But I have been a long time One Piece fan since circa 2003, so really invested in the series. And yeah, I do have some thoughts of my own about the one arc that I'd like to share.
Okay, sounds great. And Doctor, if you're ready to kind of introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm known as Doctor from the Ass Backwards Anime Podcast. You follow me on Twitter at SSAA Podcast. Yeah, I've been like a fan of One Piece since like I guess mainly college days. So it'd be like 2007. I've lost track, honestly. I'm terrible with this stuff. But yeah, yeah, I met Ash through Twitter, and I think like mutual. I think my co-host followed you, and it sort of
Yeah.
we had actually a pretty big discussion about One Piece on my podcast, and actually Ash was on there with us for that. It was really a discussion, and I think it's sort of like a kind of a mutual sort of like a hey, you were on my thing, I should be on your thing kind of situation here. Yeah.
Yeah, so all right. So before we dive in, I think most people listening to this already know kind of my history with One Piece and Doctor's history with One Piece. But Nathan, I don't think anyone really knows, your history. So you want to just dive into that a little bit.
Um, I mean, I grew up in Greece, so the first version of One Piece that I was exposed to was the Greek dub that started airing there about 2002, 2003. And that was a fucking trip. It was like, we didn't get a censored version in the sense that, most kids watching the 4Kids version did. Like, we had all the violent stuff left in. It was pretty much unedited, but they changed all the character names, the name of the show, all the copyrighted stuff for reasons I'm completely unclear on. But also bear in mind this was airing in a lunchtime slot, like around about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and censorship when it comes to what's seen as children's programming is very strict in that country. So there was like a warning issued around about the time of the Dawn Creek fight, 30 episodes in, that this is too violent. We can't have kids watching this. Eventually, show got taken off air around about the start of the Alabasta arc. So that was it for me and One Piece for a while. Then eventually, internet watching anime with subs, reading manga online. I think I got back into the fandom and following the series around about the Sabaody Impel Down arc. And from then, I've just been following it consistently.
Oh wow, it's
That's
quite a
pretty awesome.
history compared to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
everyone else's journey.
My friend just showed me it. That's it. That's my history. It's like, hey, check
Yeah.
this show out. Okay, cool. Sweet.
Yeah, I think that's how most people got into it. I remember, I think it was on the One Piece podcast when they did their own the One Piece read through. I think it was the dude that was talking about the Greek dubs and like all the different names they had for
Oh
all the
man.
One Piece characters, which was just like completely different from what we have right now. It wasn't like Zoro was Blackjack and then Usopp
It
was
was,
something else.
yeah. Usopp was Gus. Luffy was called Drake, which would have caused some real continuity difficulties. Gold Roger was called Gold-fingered Roger, something like that.
Boy.
Okay.
Yeah, way, yes, way. Uh,
Okay. All right. So I think without too much more intro into it, so Wano arc, we started at chapter, what was it, 909, and we're now at 965-ish, I want to say.
it's been
So
going on for a year.
yeah, it's been all going on for I think a little over a year now. So I kind of want to gauge before we dive too deep into like acts and other stuff like that. I want to gauge what are your general thoughts on this arc so far? Because, like I said, it has been almost half the length of Dressrosa right now, and that's quite a lot. Because Dressrosa was 100 chapters, and that is a lot of chapters. Like I know a lot of fandom was really, really, I want to say mixed on that. A lot of the fandom was just like, oh, the Dressrosa started dragging really around where Grant is right now, because Grant Thief's doing the whole big One Piece reroute thread for the first time, and he's at chapter 764, I want to say. And I'm not even the one reading through the arc right now. I'm getting fatigued just from seeing how much more he has to go through. And I'm like, all right. So I want to get your thoughts on that. Before we do that, we have another participant that came in. Gabby just joined. So you want to say hi,
Um,
Gabby, and just introduce yourself?
hi there. Hi,
Hiya.
guys. How you doing? Sorry
Good,
for being
good.
late.
That's all right. So Gab, if you want to just do a little quick intro, who you are, your Twitter handle, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is Gabby. You guys probably know me more for Haikyuu right now, but I used to be a really big One Piece fan just a couple of years ago. You can find me at YamiNFTs. I'm a fan artist and love to draw a lot of fan art. And you could say my favorite character is Luffy, but I got a pretty big obsession with Sabo as soon as he reappeared in the manga, and that's what got me into the series full time. But yeah, that's me.
All right, perfect. Well, I'm glad you managed to pop in. So, like I said,
Thank
with a
you.
big spiel, if everyone kind of wants to get in their thoughts about Wano in general overall, and then we'll kind of dive into specifics. So, whoever wants to start, go ahead.
I mean, I think anything I would bring up would probably overlap with your points because I pretty much I agree with every critique you post up on Twitter with regards to one work. Like, my personal take is that if the standard of writing that we got in the one work was the same as 2008, 2009 Impelled Down Summit War area, it would be the tightest shit ever. But right now it's kind of, it's all sort of rushed. It's all packed together. You've got Oda's gotten into that practice of introducing like 20, 30 different characters and then not actually engaging much with them or their backstories.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, all right, anyone else? Gabby, you want to give general thoughts on Wano thus far?
Okay, so here's the thing. Wano has been hyped for so many years. I've been dying to see it for so many years.
Mhm.
And right now, the thing with me is that I don't feel anything with the arc. I mean, it's like a mixture of so many characters that I really don't care about, and a plot that I'm still not sure what it really is about. Because, of course, the country is close to the world, right? So, is this going to be another country that Luffy suddenly helps free themselves? I guess. But I mean, they've been an isolated nation for so long. So, what's different now? Yeah, we got Kaido and we got Orochi and all that stuff, but the norm has been basically the same. The only thing that's different is that the people are suffering because Kaido, of course, doesn't give a shit about the country, but the general idea of the country that is isolated is the same, right? So I want to know if this is only about, a really bad government came with Kaido and Orochi, and we want to change, but why didn't do it before that? I'm kind of okay. So this is another time of where Luffy is at the right place at the right time, and suddenly everything is going to change just because. At least that's the idea I've got so far. Because of course we got Oden, and he was supposed to make a change in the country, but so far he's just not interesting to me. He's just there. I don't get why everyone loves him yet. So he happens to be a really strong person who was supposed to bring change to the country, but why? I'm still not sure why he and not another ancestor of him. You feel me? I mean, I'm still not sure what the arc is trying to say thematically.
Agree on all points, Doctor. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think during the early parts of this arc, I felt, I would say I was enthusiastic. I think the TLDR of this is that I had a project where I was going through my backlog of One Piece and everything else I've been reading in Jump. And so going through Whole Cake Island and then immediately being like, okay, I might as well just catch up while I'm here because I was basically like 2 years behind in the manga. So going into Wano, I was like, okay, I'm hearing a lot of good things. I hope it's good. Cool. I think I'm not as invested as everyone else and possibly in the fandom, at least within my circle of friends, probably. But I would say within the first parts of it, I was like, okay, this is going to progress into something, I think. And as we were going, I was like, well, okay, cool. We have Axe. I thought that's a cool like gimmick. I thought that's fun. I enjoyed the whole idea of like, this is a stage play and whatever. But as we kept going and we were adding more people into it, and after a while, I've started losing track of who is what are they relevant to. The occasional calling back to other people showing back up again. I was like, well, cool. I mean, great, but I just didn't like. I guess like after a while, I was like, well, all right. What's the deal? Okay, we have to overthrow a bad guy. Cool. Again, this is it's like you got like a certain aspect of it. So far, it's been like rescue the princess, overthrow a bad guy, and basically general adventure shit. That's kind of what One Piece is about right now.
Yeah.
We just had our rescue the princess with Sanji earlier, so now we're overthrowing the bad guy arc. Cool. It's just that I don't know what the real stakes in all of this are, aside from like, okay, Kaido, he's the big deal, and I'm like, well, okay, so we have Orochi who is bad guy, but Kaido is super bad guy. So how is Kaido the stepping stone to Orochi, or is Orochi the stepping stone to Kaido? I don't know. Like Kaido doesn't run the country, not really. I don't think so. He's just like kind of there. So, and now we have this whole backstory with Odin, who, I mean, I think a friend of mine basically described him as he's kind of like a folk hero, where it's just, like that's how he describes him as, and like I'm like that's cool, but he doesn't. I can't say he's that interesting. I think the idea of like, okay, here is like the idea of a hero.
He's Chuck Norris.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, One Piece has introduced like folk hero type characters in the past, like going back to the Skype arc, and they were all vastly more interesting than Odin.
Yeah, I would have said this is like, this is trying to be Odin. I mean, he's trying to be Nolan, but like the polar opposite version of that, where that guy is ultra good guy.
Jesus Messiah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Odin is more like a kind of a shitheel. Like he's kind of a he's kind of a douche for like the beginning parts of it. Then he was like, you know what, I should probably fix my country. And I mean that's kind of where we're at right now with the currently of a you know I'm a little mixed, I would say.
Yeah.
Positive but mixed.
Yeah, I think echoing what everyone else has said, the Wano arc was like I was so super hyped about this arc for like years and years and years. I wanted this arc to be like, I was hyping it up in my own imagination, thinking this would be a potential top three, new favorite arc, depending on how Oda has set it up, how he plays it out and how he handles it and everything else so far. And it's a little disappointing that apart from the introduction and apart from, the aesthetic style of, yes, now we're in Japan, we have all the Japanese trappings, we have samurai, we have this and all that. There's nothing really unique about Wano as an arc that really kind of separates it out from, any of the other multitudes of arcs we've had kind of come before this. And I know it's kind of an odd complaint to have what One Piece where it's like, all right, it is very formulaic in each arc. You'll have Luffy going in and, going into a country and being like, all right, what's wrong with this country? Who's the big bad guy I have to beat down? I'll go beat the bad guy down because he's doing something, to oppress this country. We'll find out about his history, blah, blah, blah. He beats up the bad guy. Everyone's happy. Citizens are happy. Their country's free again. And I get that, like saying that, well, we're getting more of the same in Wano. Why are you complaining about it? But it's like, all right, if you could literally take like any of the characters from Wano and just deposit them in another arc, and it doesn't really feel like it would make a difference to, any other arc before. It'd be like, all right, Alabasta, you couldn't take the characters from Alabasta, deposit them in, say, Dressrosa, and be like, yes, the arc would read exactly the same. And I feel like that's not really the case for Wano thus far, which is kind of weird because I feel like the prologue and the first act really set it up well, where you kind of had, almost reverse, so where you have a different group of Straw Hats, got to the island, got to explore around, and kind of were making their way through the citizens and kind of exploring the country and everything. We're setting up the conflict like that. And so I kind of want to get into your thoughts. How did you feel like the prologue and the first act did to set up Wano as a whole? Like, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it?
I mean that's tough for me because it's been a while since I've actually gone back and read those chapters. I mean, what I do want to say is that the whole issue with talking about Wano being formulaic is like, yeah, that is part of what One Piece is like, but it's a valid criticism because we are talking about an extremely long series, and when we're getting to this point of it, and we're getting something as formulaic as Wano, it's obvious that the audience is going to feel fatigued. And also, of course, I think it is starting to suffer from the sort of from the power creep, the scale creep, because of course the world as we go along gets bigger and bigger, so the threats have to get bigger and bigger. But between Wano and Whole Cake Island, facing off with threats like Big Mom and Kaido, there's no real sense of stakes or danger anymore. I feel like for me at least, there's some kind of assumption that the Straw Hats are gonna pull out of it, okay, and that was kind of seeded when we had that fake out near the end of Whole Cake Island. So it's kind of hard to feel intimidated by Kaido at this point.
So, anyone else have thoughts about that?
I need a bit reminder of where it started and where it ended.
Yeah, so Act 1, Wano, we had, everyone climbing up the waterfall and getting stuck on the beach. And then you had the general introduction of, Usopp being the toad oil salesman, Frankie, Carpenter's apprentice, Robin the geisha, and Zoro having cut the magistrate that was actually the one that was going around killing the samurai. And then you had Luffy running into Tama and then beating off Kaido's goons and then taking a ride with her to meet Hitetsu and then finding out that, Kaido's factories have been poisoning the food, poisoning the river, poisoning all the land and everything in Wano, and Luffy finding out that Tama gave him all her birthday rice and he just scarfed it down. And then, she went and drank the poison water, became sick, and then they went off to find a way to cure her. And that's when they ran into Osuru and
And
Okiku.
Kiku.
Yeah, and then they picked up Zoro on the way as well because he was in the wasteland. And then we had the whole bit with the Beast Pirates, with Hawkins chasing them down. And then Tama getting kidnapped by some of was it the gifters, I think, the ones with the Zoan powers. And then they get taken to to Hold'em, the headliner with the lion stomach. And then Luffy, Zoro, and them go to, was it Bakura Town to rescue them. And then Luffy gets involved in the sumo match. And they beat up the sumo user Urashima. And then, Hawkins shows up with his crew to get them all out, and they steal all the food from Bakura Town to go give it to the starving Wano residents. And then from there, we went into them going to the Kozuki Castle and finding out, it burnt down 20 years ago, and we're seeing the ghosts of Wano.
And they were ghosts.
Yeah, and that's when we got the whole backstory of, ghosts of Wano. The ghosts of Wano,
And the mom who died again.
Then we had Kaido doing the whole blast breath thing, and then from there, going into, I think that was the end of Act 1, was ended with Luffy getting sent to the prison.
Okay, when Kaido beats him, right?
Yeah.
That was the best chapter of the arc.
Yes.
First, I want to apologize a bit because really, I'm usually really well versed in One Piece and remember literally everything because I used to love it so much. You can ask me anything you want about Dressrosa, for example. But this arc has been so, I'm going to be honest, a bit boring that I really don't remember much of it. And I've also only read it a couple of times. But yeah, that first, I don't know, I was happy to see the other Straw Hats after so long, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, I was always a bit sad that Robin became a Geisha instead of an assassin, because that's what she does.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's not much to comment there because I mean we got Tama, and that's the usual child we meet in new arcs, and then we got Speed, the horse lady who has the worst design in the world, and I wish I could forget about her like Sora forgot about Kokoro-san, but I can't. Yeah, not much to comment there. I'm just glad that that Luffy got smashed by Kaido, at least, because I'm not a really big fan of what Oda did with Big Mom and her emperor status. So, but well, she's a woman, so it's not surprising really. So I guess at least glad that he didn't made Kaido a complete joke too. That's to be expected. Yeah, but the biggest disappointment there for me, I guess this is Act 2, but I wish Luffy had any kind of different reaction about being so quickly taken down by Kaido, but of course he's all right next. So it's like, okay, so Kaido is strong and Luffy doesn't care. Yay.
All right, before we get into it, I think we have our final participant finally in the chat. If you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Lum Ramayasha. I am one of the hosts of the Manga Mavericks podcast, and like everyone here, I'm a big fan of One Piece, so glad to participate.
All right, sounds great. If you want to just do a quick intro of how you got into One Piece. I don't think we've had a chat before, so if you want to just give a quick introduction of how you got into One Piece, and then, yeah, we can dive into it from there.
Sure thing. So I got into One Piece when it started airing on Toonami way back in 2005. And basically I started watching it because it basically replaced Dragon Ball GT's time slot. And I was like, well, this show is replacing Dragon Ball. I guess I should give it a shot. And I did, and I enjoyed it. And from there, of course, I discovered the manga and read that. And now have just been a big fan of the series ever since.
Yeah. All right. Sounds great. So we were kind of going over our general thoughts about Wano thus far. So if you want to kind of dive into, what your general thoughts are about the arc, how you feel about it, before we get any deeper into this.
Sure. And just in a general sense, I suppose that this arc continues many of the problems that I've had with the post time skip arcs, and that, the crew is all doing their separate things and whatnot, but I feel like most of the crew don't feel really emotionally involved in what's going on or really have like a stake in the arc, which is like fitting of their characters and developing their characters anyway. This is what I loved about One Piece in the early arcs, is that like every character, you got a clear sense of why they were invested in the conflict, and their stories in the arc would progress their characters or reveal something new about the characters that showed a different side of them. And here with the Wano arc, we finally have the crew reunited after 2.5 years of them being separated in Dressrosa and Whole Cake Island. But one thing is that when the crew is reunited, it didn't really feel like a huge, big emotional thing for like all these other characters to be like, oh, Sanji's back, the crew is back together. So that was a little disappointing. But also in general, I feel like, well, every character is here. Really, once again, it's really Luffy who is the most embroiled in the conflict of the arc and like has had the most impact on actually affecting change. And Zoro has done some stuff too. But in general, the other characters have just sort of been there, and they get into some conflicts here and there. Like Sanji had that fight with X Drake and that other headliner or whatever, but it's not really. I don't think that did much for Sanji's character necessarily. I have a lot of mixed feelings about him using that that power or whatever, from Vinsmoke's. So again, it's just like, just in terms of how Oda is using like the Straw Hats as characters, I don't really feel like this arc has improved on what I feel has been a big weakness, is that the Straw Hats have kind of felt like they've been there, but they have not. They don't feel like truly involved, because I don't truly have a grasp of how they are emotionally connected to everything that's going on. Really, like when the arc is at its strong, it's like focusing on these Wano specific characters. It's like focusing on the scabbards, like Odin's vassals, like Kinemon and whatnot, and like seeing, because they are the ones who are like really personally invested, who have been like for decades, years, have been trying to reclaim their country and liberate it. So like when we focus on those characters, then I kind of get a sense of the emotional stakes more so, and so I'm a little more invested in that aspect. And I do appreciate some of the lore aspects, like that Wano is tying into this the grander story of One Piece. And I'm not a big fan of the Odin character, but I do think it's interesting, like that this character apparently is so deeply involved in other aspects of the series' history, in terms of his connection to Whitebeard's pirates, and connection to Gold Roger. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out, and to see what more revelations about the world and the state of the world, and how Odin affected that, and how Wano plays into all that, and how that'll all turn out, and how ultimately the conclusion of this arc, what happens with Wano, how that is going to set the stage for the big final conflicts in the series. So, and overall, I say I feel like it's a mixed bag, and I guess I like the table setting of like maybe what the resolution and what the revelations of this arc will lead to in the future, more so than I appreciate like what Oda is doing with the characters necessarily and the plot necessarily.
Okay, so there's a lot of great points brought up, so I kind of want to touch on a few of those, and we'll kind of get to the others in this convo. But I think the first one I want to touch on is something, specifically we talk about a lot of how post-time skip doesn't feel the same as pre-time skip in quality-wise. I think everyone kind of pointed this out with how the Straw Hats don't feel as well-rounded as complex or as well-rounded or as complex as they used to, and they feel a lot more one-dimensional. And this is an argument I consistently kind of put out, and regular One Piece fans kind of tend to pigeonhole or try to zero in on that and kind of say, this is not what the series is about. But the idea that, the Straw Hats have basically stopped growing or developing after their current arc was done. After they meet Luffy, the idea is that they don't really have to change or grow or develop because they have now become, the version of themselves that we're just going to see for the rest of the series. So how do you feel like that ties into what we're seeing now, where it feels like, the Straw Hats really aren't invested in a lot of the struggles in Wano in general, but also how they feel like they're reduced to just one aspect of their character?
I mean, I think we can see that with like kind of the roles that every character is kind of expected to play in their like Wano personas. Like Usopp is this toad salesman, and then Frankie is this carpenter. Like kind of from the beginning, Oda is kind of reducing the characters to like, hey, this is the specific role this character is known for, and that's the role they're gonna play during this espionage, information gathering thing. And it's true that like the characters have, they all have, I guess, gleaned bits of information. They've done their reconnaissance and like and so they're all doing stuff, but I don't really, again, feel like I just don't feel like their personal investment in what is going on with Wano as much. Whereas like in Alabasta, in Eni's lobby, like there's clear reasons why all the Straw Hats care about wanting to save this country, wanting to help their friend, because they know people that they care about, and we know, and it's like not just Luffy who establishes these connections, but it's like everyone has established a connection with someone that they care about, they want to save or help. Here in Wano, I feel like Luffy, of course, he meets people that he wants to save and protect. Like right at the beginning of the arc, he meets Tama, and she's kind of basically, the innocents that we're meant to see. Like, oh, these are how Kaido and how
it affects.
Yeah, like how Kaido and Orochi did. I was blanking on his name. Like how like ordinary people have been affected by Kaido and Orochi taking over Wano and like starving the populace by hoarding resources and building all these factories and working people to extreme conditions and creating a list prison and just a real totalitarian state and whatnot. So, and then Luffy gets directly involved in a lot of these different aspects because like he fights Holden and then deliberates Bakura Town or Okabura Town and gives food to all the people. Then he gets put in the prison and he liberates all the people in the prison and reinvigorates their fighting spirit and their desire to save their country. He gives them hope. Like Luffy very clearly is involved in essential, but I don't really feel like all the other characters are essential, and I don't feel like they are growing in any way through this conflict. Whereas in Alabasta, like every character, I feel like they were essential to how the story played out. Like Sanji as Mr. Prince, he got them out of the prison and saved everyone basically. And then, Nami had her big character development fight when she fought Miss Doublefinger, and that not only did she show off like her tenacity, but like that was like one of the first like that was Nami really putting her life on the line to save someone else and that was like a big moment, I thought. And then I felt the same for basically all the Straw Hats. Is like we really see them grow and like push themselves. And then I felt that with Alabasta, with Skypiea, and Water 7's Lobby. And here, so far, I'm not really feeling that. One thing is that the Straw Hats, most of them have become so strong at this point that it doesn't feel like a lot of people can truly tread in them and truly push them both physically and emotionally to their limits. So, even when characters are getting to fights, they just don't feel, they feel pretty weightless, as mentioned. It's disappointing because I want to be invested in each of the Straw Hats because I like the Straw Hats as like a family unit. I like feeling the connection between them and seeing how that connection between them helps them overcome obstacles. But I just haven't felt that. I haven't felt like the obstacles they've been put up against the New World have truly tested those bonds and tested those relationships. I mean, with the possible exception of Whole Cake, since that was predicated on whether Sanji would leave the group or not, I suppose. But even then, could have done a little better if more of the characters were involved, and like more than just Luffy or Nami were put into a conflict with Sanji there. But and then it's like they're not really being the bond of the group is not really being challenged or in any way. And then also, again, they feel very disconnected from like the people who actually have like the emotional investment in liberating Wano, like the scabbards of Odin, like the Odin's vassals. Like whenever they are like being stressing out over whether the plan will work, and it's especially very recently when it seems like all hope is lost, like in terrible weather, all their allies are nowhere to be seen, and they're just like breaking down. And then Dogstorm is like, there's one boat, we'll take this, we're gonna continue to fight, that I can grasp emotionally, understand like why they are so desperate, why they wanna. What is at stake here? But again, I want the Strats to be involved with that more. I just don't feel it.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I totally agree. You actually make me recall one of my main complaints with the new world, and that's the Straw Hats, because they definitely don't feel like characters anymore. They're just like puppets moving around.
Yeah.
My biggest disappointment, for example, was with Robin, because I say, for example, when they go to Zoo, I was so excited to see her do some archaeological stuff with the country, because I mean that was one of my favorite parts with Skypiea, but then she's just there and nothing happens. And it's like, okay, so this doesn't matter anymore. We've gone past this, and that's the thing. I feel like Oda just can't find the right balance between the Straw Hats, who are basically why we follow this story, because it wouldn't be One Piece without them. Yeah, you can say the world building is amazing and the story is so complex, but what would it be without them? And I think it's really a big problem for the story to have the main characters just don't matter anymore. You could basically put any of the supernova crews there, and I guess that'd be the same if they care. I mean, it's funny how I'm more interested in seeing what Kid or what Killer or what any of the other supernovas are going to do than the Straw Hats, because they are just there doing what I thought they do. that's just a big problem. I feel like the plot has gotten so big that it basically swallowed all of the characters, and now they just do what they need to do, not what they. I mean, I feel like someone is moving them, not themselves, and that's
Yeah,
just
like the story
not
is
the same.
plot driven rather than character driven now.
Mm-hmm. And it's always been plot driven and character driven. So it's like, for me at least, it's just jarring to not see any character development from the characters. Sanji was a big one for me. Whole Cake Island, I don't like what Oda did with him there because I don't feel like he changed at all. It's
Yeah,
like, okay, this arc only glorified Sanji. It didn't make him change at all. So why did we need that arc? I would have liked to see an arc about Big Mom than him, to be honest. Big Mom
yeah,
only became the birdcage for Whole Cake Island, which for me as a woman, it just sucks.
Yeah.
I forget the reason why Sanjay decided to use that like superpower thingy, the cocaine.
Oh boy,
Oh my
that's
god.
that's because he was just like, oh no, I need to protect my identity in case something happens to Nami and Robin, even though I'm the very reason that Drake and Page One are, chasing us down. Because the entire incident came out from Sanji had that Soba cart, and then a bunch of Wano goons were like, oh hey, we don't like you muscling in on our territory. And they came and broke down his cart, and he's just like, oh hey, you can't do that. And he created a scene where he beat them up because he's like, "Oh, you can't waste food." And everyone's like, "Oh my God, it's Sanji! Being Sanji again. Oh, it's so great to see the original guy back again." And then because of that, Orochi was like, "Hey, find out who the hell this Sangoro is, and let him know that you can't mess with Wano's forces." And Sanji's like, "Well, now that any reservations I have about wearing the suit go completely out the window, and I need these invisibility powers to be, a creeping lech. So let's get on with it."
Yeah,
Yeah, for how much Sanji loaded the Vince Manley, how he renounced himself as a Vince Smoke, like for him to use the raid smoke so casually was very disappointing. Like if he like as soon as Oda introduced the idea that he had the raid suit, like obviously it was set up that he would use it at some point, but like to just use it really without for such a kind of a shallow
nonchalantly.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like for I think it would have been more satisfying, or at least it would have been much more believable if he had been pushed into a moment of desperation where he like had to use the power of the raid suit.
yeah,
It should have been a moment like
Exactly.
Chopper
Yeah.
using the rumper ball, or like a moment where he's
Uh-huh.
pushed so emotionally that he kind of even disassociates himself from like his identity, like Usopp readopting the Soja King persona in the fight with Perona on Triller Bark. Like I really wish it was like a really emotionally desperate moment that made forced Sanji to do something that essentially
Yeah.
he shouldn't have wanted to do.
Yeah.
Or he should
He
have
didn't need it. I mean, did you see the customs that either Law or Hawkins used? He could just put a bucket on his head and say, any name and whatever, and it would have worked.
I feel
I
like.
think
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
the worst thing for me at least is that, okay, yeah, this is a let's call it a really dire moment. He uses it. Okay, I can get it. But then when he uses to spy on the girls, it's like, okay, man, yeah, I know you're the worst person in this world. Okay, but didn't you say that this suit was just an awful reminder for you? At least don't use it for your leech stuff. That just made me so. Okay, so if it's awful to use it because of your pride, but not to use it against and to spy on girls bathing. Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
Sanji, you learned so much in the last arc. You are so amazing.
I mean, if we
You
were to talk
developed
about all of the
much.
issues with
You
Sanji, that would be a
respect
whole
so
different discussion.
Yeah,
A
okay.
whole
Yeah, that's true.
discussion of
That's
its
true.
own.
Yeah, I would wonder, like, because the idea of this, and this is something that for me, who I have very big interest in stuff like tokusatsu. So Kamen Rider was the immediate thing that came to mind when I saw the idea of like him actually using this power. If you don't know the history about it, it's basically like a dude gets kidnapped by an evil organization. They they transform him into like their own like personal soldier, but then he realizes the injustices of what they're doing and uses their own technology against the bad guy. So that idea I thought would have been great. Like, oh, he uses the technology
Mm-hmm.
from the Vinsmokes
Yeah.
for good, but
Yeah.
he one he didn't like. I would have been great. Oh yeah, he comes in a situation where like, oh, he has no choice but to use it because he already hates the Vinsmokes. But then do that on top of that, using it for like being all pervy and stuff, which is just like
Mm-hmm.
everything that we tried to fix in Whole Cake Island for Sanji. It was like 2 steps forwards, 3 steps back.
See, that's the funny
He
thing though,
loves
because
women so much,
yeah, that's the
right?
funny thing whenever you see other fans arguing about that moment, right? And the debatability about like, should Sanji have put on the suit for that? And a lot of them will defend it by saying, well, it is very in character for him because he's putting aside his pride, to save his friends and do what's best for them, even if it repulses him to put on the suit, for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. And it's like there was no reason
Yeah.
he really needed it for a disguise. He could have wrapped a bandana around his head, covered his face, and it would have
Yeah.
achieved the same
Uh-huh.
effect without him needing the suit. And then I
Mm-hmm.
even I think I wrote a thread when that first came out talking about, about what Lim was talking about, the Straw Hats having like an emotional investment in this arc. I pointed out, that Sanji could have become, kind of like the folk hero of Wano, kind of like the witching boy, who at night
Mm.
went around, feeding the hungry masses of Wano, pulling along a soba cart behind him in this disguise as Sangoro the soba chef. And that would have served, the purpose of being like, all right, we're getting back to the basics of what made Sanji such a great character, and that yes, he will feed anyone who's hungry, and he's feeding people that are actually hungry, that are actually suffering in this arc.
Mm.
And it'll also be like, all right, now you have a reason for, the Straws to get emotionally involved, where Sanji's going around seeing like, Orochi's doing this to his people. How dare he, live in his little paradise farm and keep the best food
Mm.
for himself and let everyone else starve. But instead we
Heck,
get that
imagine
one.
even if Sanji had used the 99 recipes that he got from
Yeah,
Okama Island
yeah,
and
exactly.
taught them how to make the poison actually nutritious, and then maybe make the citizens start to feel like they can fight back. Something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
there
That
could
would
be
have
exactly.
been
some
amazing.
options to use Sanji in a very compelling way, because food can really make a difference, because that's why Wano is suffering. They don't have how to live. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because it kind of feels like this ties into the idea that fans have of being like, the Straw Hats will never kind of fundamentally change from who they are. So they'll always say like, oh, well, Sanji will never let anyone disrespect food. Sanji will never let, hit a woman. Sanji will never do this, blah, blah, blah. But Oda never really goes out of his way to challenge any of the Straw Hats on their kind of preconceived beliefs about what they stand for. And that was one of my biggest problems with Whole Cake Islands. Everyone says, oh, that arc was meant to reinforce the idea that Sanji could have given in and decided that violence would have been a good answer to all of his problems, where he can just beat up people to get what he wants. But instead, even after suffering all that abuse, he still decided to be a kind person, a nice person, and all that. But we never actually saw Sanji consider the idea of, what if I was going to be evil? What if I did decide to beat up people or get back at someone? Instead, Oda's just like, no, we're just going to play out a series of events where it just so happens that everything Sanji does will work out perfectly for him. And then we can reinforce this idea that he's a really nice person. And that means in every arc after this, we can justify any shitty thing he does by saying, well, he did it for a nice reason. And I'm just like, really just falls flat for me a lot of the time when he does that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk about that with regards to, kind of like the Straw Hats and their emotional investment. I want to ask, do you feel like they are taking the threat of this arc seriously?
No.
Because I know Whole Cake was like kind of the
No.
first arc where we faced off against an emperor, even though not really. And Wano's like the
No.
first one where we're just like, all right, we are finally going toe to toe with one of the biggest forces of power in this world. The Marines have the seven warlords, they have all their forces, and they're all to counteract the influence that the emperors have on this one half of the world. Two of the emperors, when we saw this back in East Blue, we saw Whitebeard and Shanks about to clash. The Marines were shitting their pants because they're like, oh shit, two of the emperors are going to meet. What is going to go on? Like, this could have repercussions all over the world. And we saw this even with Marineford, where one emperor was able to take on the Marines at the seat of their power and almost absolutely annihilate them. And then we have the Straw Hats going into Wano against one of these forces, and they're sitting around chilling and making jokes about how good it is to
Yeah.
be together again, and how simple it is. And it's like it doesn't feel like they actually think they're facing off against a threat.
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought that up earlier. I kind of went a wee bit off topic. But like in this arc, we've got Big Mom and Kaido drunkenly forming a pirate alliance, like the two of the most powerful pirate captains in the world teaming up, and it's just meh. It's just whatever. This should be the hypest fucking shit, but it's whatever.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't know
Yeah.
what to say about that.
I would say the constant the idea of the power creep, the shonen power creep of where as we go along, as your characters get stronger, you expect some level of like strength opposed to them, even if it's like, hey, aliens show up. Okay, now we have to fight aliens. Cool. But we don't got that. We at least know the emperors are going to be the guys that are going to be like the strongest that they have right now, I'd assume. Unless someone magically shows up. We don't know. Guy with, I don't know, mysterious straw hat. We don't know who that is.
I mean, I think it's been pointed out that one of the problems that has caused this is that Haki is basically the end all be all in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
our world. Like, we before the time skip, it was all very much influenced by what your particular devil fruit power was, and obviously there were guys that had really OP shit. Like you had NL with his lightning fruit, you had Crocodile with his sand fruit that could suck out moisture, but also you could have any kind of ability, and as long as you were smart enough or inventive enough, you could do whatever the fuck. Like Buggy could be so OP, like he's probably the one guy that Mihawk can't kill because he can just cut himself into pieces.
Yeah.
True.
But like by the time you get to the new world, it's all about Haki and who's got the hardest armament Haki or who can predict movements to the point that they can see into the future. It's all become kind of well, it's all very kind of Dragon Ball Z at this point. There's no real inventiveness to it.
Yeah, I actually want to touch on that with hockey. How many of you think that, like, I think Oda's always kind of had an idea, like a general idea of wanting to introduce hockey into the series at some point? Because he introduced, like, the basics of observation with Mantra and Skypiea. And he basically kind of indicated that, there was a way to fight Logia users because we saw Dragon grabbing onto Smoker, in his solid form back at Logtown. So he introduced the idea of, all right, there is going to be a way to fight back against Logia users at some point. And that was the reason I was okay with hockey at first. Because it's like, even if
Yes.
you get inventive with your devil fruit, even if you do, whatever, there will be a point where you'll fight off against someone like Akainu with his magma fruit, where just inventiveness and, capability won't be enough. You need something kind of extra to be able to actually do damage to someone that can turn into, like actual lava. So it's like, all right, hockey is the bypass for that. Where it's like, all right, now you have a way to level the playing field and, kind of give everyone an equal chance to do it. But then it seems like as we go along, like Oda's coming up with more and more rules for how now hockey operates. Where it's like with observation, it's like, all right, now we can see the future. And in one arc, Luffy can master the ability to see the future because instinct and battle and stuff. And then we have with Wano, it's like, oh, in Wano we have a completely different kind of hockey, which explodes you from the inside because, we have to face off against Kaido and we can't hurt him from the outside, so I need a new ability now. And I'd be okay with even all of that, but it's just like there's no set rules for how hockey works. And if it was more equal and merit based, where if it's like, all right, anyone would be able to, use hockey and learn and be a capable fighting force, it'd be better. But it's just like, all right, no, all the strong characters are the only ones that will have really good hockey. All the weak characters will still not have it. So we're just going to perpetuate the systems we had from pre-time skip to post. And I'm just like, you could be so much more inventive with this power. But Oda's just like, nah, I'm just going to do the same stuff all over again. But I'm just going to keep adding new levels to make it seem more complex.
It would be interesting if he went a little bit more in depth with Conqueror's Haki. Because obviously, you going back to saying whether he had early plans for this sort of thing at the beginning, obviously that was seeded as early as Luffy's backstory with Shanks, where he's able to intimidate the Sea King with, just one glance. And I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that necessarily I would want something like the sort of developments we've been getting with Conqueror's Haki, but that particular power is also very abstract. We just know that it can overcome someone's will. It can make thousands of people lose consciousness at the same time. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with this.
That's
I
right.
think the powers kind of lost their original meaning. And that's how I feel, at least with Conqueror's Haki. It's like at first at least the way I understood it was that it was basically a strong will that could make you submit to someone. But then we got characters like, say, for example, Hancock is supposed to have Conqueror's Haki, but she doesn't have really any ambition other than staying in her island and living a peaceful life. So why would you give it to her? And I love Hancock. She's one of my favorite characters, but it's like Oda, you only use it to say, yeah, she's strong. But then what? And then the power scaling just started to be too wide. And that's funny because I thought Haki was really, really a really smart move at first, because of course it let you at least fight Logia users. And at least for me, at first I thought that Armament Haki was just the strongest, that Conqueror's Haki was just about will and would maybe would help you decide who is a better suited leader, but not necessarily someone stronger. Because I at least I felt like it. You had how you'd say this, that it was important to be a good leader and also strong. That they didn't have to compete with each other. You know what I mean, and that someone could be a good leader but shouldn't have to be the strongest. So it was a nice way to show us that being emotionally strong was also important to be a strong person. But then you get to the point where Conqueror's Haki also means strength. So then it's like, okay, so what's really the power scaling here? You get Pika against Zoro, and they both have armament Haki, and at least I would like to see, okay, I have this power, and then I'll have to use my imagination and my ingenuity to make me win this fight. But no, you then say, his Haki was stronger than his. So it's like, okay, so what makes his Haki stronger? Is it training? Is it what? I feel like the original purpose for those powers just got lost into the power scaling, just because Oda made the story so big that he really couldn't find a more original way to use those powers. So it's like I feel like they just lost their original meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I like in the recent movie. It basically was just like them using giant lasers at each other.
For real? I haven't seen it, but oh my god,
it's like him and Bullet, that little hockey off that they had there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah. Oh man, like I think the worst thing about hockey is now it's just become like a punching contest. Where
Yeah.
before, like with
Oh.
someone like Crocodile or Smoker or whoever, Luffy had to find like inventive ways to get around their power. Where it's like, all right, that moment where Luffy's like, I'm gonna use blood, punch you in the face because blood can make sand harden too. One of the most badass lines in the entire series, one of the greatest Luffy moments. And now we have where it's just Luffy being like, all right, I'm just gonna train until I can punch you really, really hard, and that's how I'm gonna win. It's just punch you really hard. It's just like, all right, all the creativity went down to this fight where it's just like, all right, we're gonna have a
Yeah.
Luffy Katakuri Machismo punching contest to see
Yeah,
who can come out on top. And it's
faster,
like,
or I'm gonna punch him
Yeah.
faster. I'm gonna punch him from an angle.
Yeah, One Piece is really running into the same problem that Dragon Ball had, where as the series goes on, it will becomes about a matter of who can punch each other the hardest, like who has the strongest punch, and the unique skills everyone has matters less and less, and it gets to a point where no one really has unique skills that matter anymore.
Yeah, it's like reverse JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. You start with stains and then eventually go back to home. Like, oh, who can breathe better now? That's how you can break this dude's stand who can stop time and manipulate the earth. Just breathe harder and punch.
It's like you go from stands and then everyone
Get bigger
has
lungs.
black ones.
Yeah.
oh man, right. So I'm gonna dive into this from there to all right. So the Kaido fight. Like I think everyone kind of agrees that the moment where Luffy gets, bitch slapped by Kaido with his club, and Kaido's just like telling him, what were you going to be the king of again, boy, was one of the greatest moments in Wano, if not the greatest moment in Wano thus far.
I mean, I'm second only to the actual reveal of Kaido's dragon form.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so that was one of the best forms, was the reveal of Kaido's dragon form. So I want to talk about we're talking about the whole facing off against Damned Emperor and the consequences and everything. So why do you feel like the consequences need to be important? Like, what is Oda doing well with that? Like, what has he been doing worse with regards to kind of consequences and stakes and all that? Because I think after that part where Luffy gets knocked down by Kaido, it feels like all the tension has been drained out of the potential conflict with the Emperors. It doesn't feel like the Straw Hats are really going to be struggling against these forces. Because we had that moment in the prison where Luffy's hugging all the prisoners, and Chopper's like, "Oh no, Luffy, you can't do that. You're going to get infected by this mummy virus." And then literally in the next chapter, 2 minutes later, he's like, "Oh no, it's fine. You're cured. Go ahead. It's fine. We're good."
Yeah, it's like I mean, there's a direct contrast there between when Luffy got poisoned in the fight with Magellan and Impel Down, and he went through this incredibly arduous healing process, and we know that this has actually shortened his lifespan considerably. And I mean, that was again not to carry on beating a dead horse, but that was during the era when when there were tangible consequences. We could see that it was a struggle, and now, as you say, I guess there's both sort of the point you raised. The tension is completely drained after the Kaido fight, and what Gabby was talking about earlier, in that the characters aren't emotionally invested. We don't see them so much struggling with what should be the incredibly daunting prospect of having to go up against a warlord, and now two warlords. Yeah, there's a tone problem and also a pacing problem in that there's so much shit packed in to the chapters these days that we can't really process it. We can't really internalize any kind of build-up of tension, or at least that's my impression. That's my reading experience of it.
I mean, I don't want to continue using this guy as a punching bag, but remember when Sanji nose bleeding was actually taken seriously? And like during the Fishman Island stuff, was like him nose bleeding so hard that like, oh no, he could possibly die. I'm like, how is this taken? Why is this the thing that like we're supposed to be worried about? Like, it's meant as a goof, and then then you go back a few years later, you're going to this. It's just like, oh, it's fine, don't worry, it's all good. It's like,
I mean, part of the problem was that the Fishman Island arc was mostly a setup for just showing how badass the Straw Hats had become after the time skip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I want to put this out there. Do you think this is a problem of like with the power scaling? Because I know Otis talked about this in interviews before where he said, I have no idea how Luffy's going to beat Kaido because I don't want him to, just do like a million Goma Goma punches and just take him out through sheer force. He's trying to come up with creative ways to get around that. So you think that's what he's struggling with?
If only he had some friends along with him to help out or something. Wow.
That brings up another idea though, because there's also a lot of debate in the fandom about, is Luffy going to one-on-one KO Kaido? Because there's kind of like a few different competing thoughts with that. Where I know Greg from the One Piece podcast, the big OP guru, he said that Momonosuke has to be the one to take the final strike on Kaido to take him down, because that's been his setup arc since the beginning. Is where like Momo told Luffy, I want to take down Kaido. I want to protect my people. So he's in the camp of like, all right, we're going to see a team up fight, in the vein of the story of Momotaro, where he'll land the final blow on Kaido, a la Smaug in Hobbit, where he goes and hits him on the heart, he goes down and flies down.
Oh, is this like a Game of Thrones thing? Because I remember Greg mentioning that he turned Oda onto Game of Thrones or something like that.
I'm not confident that will be how it plays out. That it would be thematically honestly, it would be the most appropriate for Momonosuke to land that final blow. But just based on how the series has played out, I don't have much hopes for anything but Luffy one-on-one taking out Kaido, because like in the past, we've had arcs where Luffy is fighting on the behalf of someone who wants to take down someone else. Like with Alabasta, it was Vivi wanted to take down Crocodile, and Luffy landed a final blow on Crocodile. In Dressrosa, it's like Law is the one who wanted to take down Doflamingo, and it's Luffy who takes down Doflamingo. Yeah. Like, I guess Law's there, but he doesn't land the final blow or anything. But so it's like, I just based on the pattern of what Oda has done, I just don't have much hope for anything but Luffy one-on-one taking out Kaido, unfortunately. Like, I feel like with a threat as big as Kaido, it should be a group effort. It should be like the Oars fight, where it's like all the Straws working together to take down this guy, or at least Luffy alongside a bunch of other characters take out this guy. But man, I just don't have faith, and that's how it's going to play out, especially with all this buildup of Luffy learning these new hockey techniques to hit Kaido or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I do agree with that in terms of past patterns, but surprisingly, I'm also willing to credit Oda with possibly sort of seeding towards Momonosuke striking the final blow on Kaido. I mean, there's the whole issue that Momonosuke has a dragon fruit power deriving from an artificial fruit that presumably is basically an inferior copy of Kaido's fruit. And maybe my memories on this aren't clear. Maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure we're not really explicitly told why there was an artificial dragon fruit. So I'm kind of extrapolating. Like, one of the things we know about Kaido is that he's got this massive death wish. Like, he's one of the most powerful living beings on the planet. He's constantly looking for ways to off himself, but he can't quite manage it. So I'm thinking there's one of two reasons that there's an artificial dragon fruit. Like, either it's a vanity project, ties into the whole sort of thematic shit he's got going on, like the Army of Dragons. All of his top fighters are dinosaur themed guys, or it's part of his pursuit of death. Like, only a dragon could kill a dragon, so he's trying to create the person that's going to kill him. I know
Okay.
that's just my theory.
Like Pokemon.
Yeah, so this is where we're kind of diving into my territory from like a couple of years ago because I haven't done this since. But I've did so much theorizing with like Kaido and his powers and his devil fruit and everything like way before we got into Wano. And I'm still of the mind that Vegapunk at one point, because we know Kaido was a prisoner of the Marines at several points during his lifetime. Because we know in the whole introduction spiel we got from him we had, he's fought against the Marines this many times, against other emperors this many times. He's been a prisoner this many times, and he's been tortured and experimented on, etc. And I feel like that's what happened with Kaido is that Vegapunk got his hands on him at one point when he was a prisoner of the Marines, and that he experimented on him and his devil fruit, and he extracted, the mechanics of how to try to create a new artificial dragon devil fruit and I feel like, he had some of it right and some of it wrong. That his experimental trial was to try and create something like Kaido's dragon fruit, and he failed, which is why Momo got his hands on it, turned into a dragon that looks exactly like Kaido does now, except pink versus blue. But I kind of want to talk about that as well, because Kaido so far he's supposed to be like we know Orochi's kind of just coasting on Kaido's reputation as an emperor to kind of keep Wano and to deal with the Marines. Basically saying, I've got this big club with me. If you do anything, I'll hit you with it. Well, we haven't really seen Oda explore Kaido as a character. Like so far, apart from the drunken rampage, we haven't really seen hints of a personality from Kaido, what drives him, because we have his backstory where we know he's with the Rocks Pirates at some point. He owes some kind of debt to Big Mom. There's some Shanks managed to somehow convince him not to go after Whitebeard at some point. So there's a lot of history behind this character, but we're 60 chapters into Wano and Oda hasn't really dove into that. I'm kind of curious what you guys think about why hasn't he kind of dug into Kaido's backstory yet? And you think he's kind of saving it up for something coming down the line in the future?
I mean, I would fully expect that we're probably going to get some form of backstory arc for Kaido because Oda loves backstory arcs, flashbacks. I mean, like he even gave us one for Big Mom. So, yeah, anyone else want to chime in?
I'm also expecting a Kaido backstory arc, and that's when, just like Big Mom, that's when we're gonna get all these big revelations about his history and his character. So I am kind of waiting for that, and I wonder if we might get some of that during the Odin flashback itself, or if everything will just be saved for his own prolonged flashback down the line.
Yeah. Because I think that's also one of my other things, like tied to a couple of other points everyone else has brought up, is like thematically this arc doesn't seem to have kind of an overreaching, theme or point or something that's trying to explore. And it feels like Kaido's crew is part of that, where, we've only been introduced to really Queen out of all the, top head honchos of Kaido's crew. And Queen's entire shtick so far has just been that he's a giant joke, who does dancing and has like the same gag that every other conventionally unattractive person does, of being like, oh, you think I'm pretty, oh wow, 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 and everyone's like, no, no, you're not really that hot. And so it kind of
which also ties into him being part of the Okama demographic.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So like that feels like it again ties into the thing of like, all right, Oda's got all these pieces coming in, but 60 chapters and he doesn't really seem to know how to tie them together. And I'm like, I'm already seeing fans speculate that Wano's going to be like, twice the length of Dressrosa. Is going to go over 100 chapters at this point. And I'm kind of struggling to see how Oda is going to bring in and wrap up so much more of this arc in whatever chapters he has left.
How many acts is that?
I feel like we're on the last act. It's like just gonna culminate in this battle on Onigashima, and I don't know if the Straw Hats will definitively like take out Kaido for good, but like I assume they'll liberate Wano through some means of pushing the Kaido and Big Mom back, I guess, and getting Orochi out of power. And I don't know if there's going to be anything big for all these other subordinate characters of Kaido in terms of like revelations or like character development or whatnot. I feel like they'll just be there for people to get fights, and then the big draw is just going to be the fight with Kaido, and then we'll see what happens with that, what revelations come out of that, I guess.
Yeah, but like, what's the lesson in all of this?
I think the overall idea of this arc is inheritance, and then like basically coming into the role of leadership. Like that's kind of Momonosuke's arc, is that he's basically being prepped to reclaim the throne, lead all of Odin's vassals, be the symbol of hope for the people again. And it's like tying into this Odin flashback. It was like, Odin is basically put into this role as he's the inspiration for all these other people. Like he's growing into a leader of people and whatnot. So that's I think what the whole point there is supposed to be with that flashback, and then connecting it with the stuff in the present. And then of course it's Luffy is also kind of, we know from just that Luffy is a natural like leader, naturally is able to bring people together and inspire them. And he's already done that with the prisoners, and basically the entire like protagonist group is kind of centered around Luffy leading the charge too. But yeah, and then there's also these ideas about Luffy, being kind of a spiritual successor to Gold Roger and whatnot. And I bet the Odin flashback will reveal more stuff about that now that Odin is going to meet Gold Roger or whatever. So I feel like that's the point of it. It's basically exploring like the destiny of leadership and inheritance or whatever, which I don't know. I'm not too invested in that idea when it comes to like monarchies and then like, this is the right ruler that must reclaim the throne, because that's not really a great idea, this idea of like, because this guy is from a royal lineage, he is destined to be a leader and he is the right ruler. And so that the peace will be restored once the right ruler ousts the usurper or whatever. So I'm pretty tired of those narratives, and they're pretty like out of date.
I mean, I would probably say like him coming in, overthrowing Orochi, and then realizing, hey, let's not have monarchy. That kind of is lame. Yeah. I'm also a child. Maybe we could probably vote on stuff.
Okay, so there's a few interesting. So there's a few interesting points I want to kind of touch on there, because I've seen some other OP fans talk about how this arc is about leadership and drawing the comparisons between the Straw Hats and Oden and the Scabbards, and saying that we're seeing an alternate kind of future where what would happen if the Straw Hats had lost Luffy at some point, what would happen to them as people, what would happen to their goals and everything like that. And we're kind of seeing that play out with Oden. I kind of want to try that and to talk about what was everyone's thoughts about this character we've seen so hyped up throughout the arc and throughout the series in Oden, when we finally got to that introduction of that character.
Well, Odin is not dissimilar from Luffy in how, like, gung-ho and carefree he approaches life, I suppose. I mean, I think there is supposed to be parallels made between Luffy and Odin. I mean, I don't care for the character of Odin just because what we see in the series, he comes off as someone incredibly inconsiderate of other people beyond being a harasser and abductor of women. So I was turned off on Odin. But a scene that really showed how much kind of disregard he has for other people is like, especially that scene like in his introduction chapter where we see him crashing this funeral and he's paying respects to this guy, but he's basically like interrupted this funeral and ruined it for all these other grieving friends and family members. And like, we're supposed to take that as a moment of, hey, Odin is like an honorable dude, like he has this connection and he's paying respects to his friend in his own way, but he's doing that by destroying the ability of all these other people, all these other friends and family of this guy to grieve by interrupting this funeral and causing a ruckus. And so that immediately just kind of turned me off onto that. Also turned me off onto Odin, if beyond just the stuff before, because to me, like, Luffy is at least in the beginning, he was a compassionate person. Like, he would be considerate of other people. And now, but Odin, he does not seem considerate at all. And like heroic things he does, he just happens into. He's there and he does the thing that somehow makes him so cool and inspiring to all these other people. Like slicing up the giant pig, he's there, he does that. I guess he takes the fall for Kinemon, I guess, but it's not really much of a big deal to him. It seems he just does it, and then with rescuing like Dogstorm and Cat Viper and Kawamatsu, from the people who have tied them up or are about to kill them, whatever. Like he does that because he's there, and then he just leaves. It's like, I don't know. He's very he's like Luffy in just that he will just do what he wants, but there's just, for a character who is built up as this heroic, inspiring figure, like, he really turns me off by by acting with such disregard for other people and just following his own pure desires without any consideration to whether he's inconveniencing other people or whether he's actually causing harm or actually being disruptive and damaging in whatever pursuits he's doing.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on Odin's introduction?
I think it's probably never meet your heroes. It's kind of a lesson I get from this. I mean, like, this is for the audience. The story of Odin is for the audience who's reading this. So, like, to have this, to open the idea of, like, oh, what is Odin and what his backstory is, and kind of you're left with the opportunity to really mess him up by way of, like, capturing a bunch of women. I mean, they could leave, but they wouldn't say no because of the implication. Yeah, but it's like, you have this character who comes across as, like I mentioned, shitheel. And it's like, well, what does this benefit everyone else as far as, like, I would say the characters? Like, we know we're learning about this character ourselves. That way we understand the backstory and why he is the way he is. But what does that mean to everyone else? This is just a story that, I mean, we could have probably been okay with never knowing who Odin is, aside from, like, oh, he's connected to Whitebeard or anyone else. And
yeah, it's like Odin is this character that is apparently so integral and beloved by Whitebeard's crew, by Roger's crew, and he apparently is so ingrained into huge events in the series. So apparently we didn't have to know him, and Oda has done this because he wants to, really tie in Wano with the larger lore and plot developments within the story. So this is I get, I understand, like, Odin as a device in that respect, and I understand, like, I mean, it makes sense to explore Odin as a character and see, like, what made this guy a big deal for all these people. But in doing so, I just don't really feel it because Odin just has come off as unlikable from, my perspective. And I think a lot of other people, so here especially too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's when you build up a character to that extent, in the reader's imagination, sometimes, like, maybe it's actually worse to go about it this way and actually show it. Maybe it's best to leave it to the imagination. Like, my big worry at the moment is that the current the quality of the Odin flashback is going to reflect on an eventual Roger flashback, and I'm just thinking maybe that should be left to the imagination. Maybe we don't need to see Roger's past as well. Maybe we can just imagine that.
I've already felt we've learned and seen too much of Gold Roger, like, throughout the series. I liked when he was just, like, this idea. and like that he was this inspirational figure, but he was this mythic figure, and we didn't need to know that much about him.
It was great when he was larger than life, and his power and his abilities existed sort of in the abstract. But obviously, we're getting to this point in One Piece where everything has to be shown and narrated and quantified, and I'm just worried that that's going to take that away from his character.
I think I might be a semi-outlier on that just because I have different thoughts regarding that and Luffy because I think a lot of the problems I have with Oden, you kind of guys all went over in that, he's not really a likable person. And a lot of people are talking about, well, that's kind of the point is, leaders don't always have to be likable as long as they are, good leaders and they eventually do what's good for the country. And I think this also ties into my larger problems with the series and with the Straw Hats' role and talking about how, how their agents have changed and they go around, inspiring other people to act and change, and they're going to eventually overthrow the current world order and become, its new saviors and its new heroes. And there's always a lot of talk about, how the Straw Hats are, complex or morally gray characters because they're pirates and they don't adhere to rules and they're not heroes and all that. But throughout the series, like Oda never has them play a role other than that of being, the morally good heroes that will always do the right thing. So no matter what island they go to, they will always be the saviors, even if they are playing the role of being like, oh, well, we're not saviors. We're just doing this because we want to. We don't consider ourselves heroes and all that. And I think that ties into my problems with Luffy, Oden, similarly, is a lot of people after Whole Cake Island ended will point to that scene where, Jinbei is being left behind. And Luffy gets up and he's just like, oh, Jinbei, you have to come back to me because I'm your captain now. And they'll be like, wow, that's such a great leadership moment for Luffy. Wow, he's such a great leader. And I'm like, that's not what a good leader does. Like, Luffy got them into this mess in the first place. Jinbei staying behind to clean it up. And he's acting like a good captain and a good leader would. Because he's like, I got my men into this mess. And I can't, in good conscience, just let them clear it up for me. Because that's not what a good captain should do. And here Luffy is being like, oh, well, I can't really do anything about it. I'll just move on. And he also really doesn't learn anything from that going forward because he'd be like, all right, I'm just going to do exactly the same things going forward that I will do before. But it's not really going to matter because anything I do won't result in consequences that will make me re-examine, my leadership style or what I do as a captain. And I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. Like, do you feel like Luffy is actually a good leader or a good captain? Because I know everyone says he is because he is inspiring, that he inspires people, to kind of rise up and pursue their dreams and their wants. But I don't know if that always equates to the idea that doing so means you are a good leader overall. So I kind of want to get thoughts on that.
I think an important aspect of leadership is accepting responsibility and acting upon it. And I feel like Luffy is very irresponsible and driven to his impulsive tendencies in a way that causes more problems than if he had been more considerate about the needs about his friends, about the people that he's trying to protect, and just the larger, bigger picture. And it's in the that's not how Oda has characterized him as that kind of person, I suppose. But I feel that that is the quality of what makes a good leader. And so it's more than just inspiring people or telling them what to do, which is what we see Luffy do. Is that he inspires people to, fight, and then he tells people, oh, you shouldn't give up. You shouldn't do this thing. You should do this thing. You should believe in me. And it's like, that's all well and good, but I really feel like Oda really drops the ball with the responsibility aspects that leadership entails. At least what I believe makes a good leader. And I feel like he fails in that time and time again. And with Oden, I feel the same way, especially as that Oden is a character who's inspiring all these people around him, but he's not he's incredibly irresponsible. He causes so much damage, and in doing so inconveniences tons of people. It's yet he just ends up becoming beloved because I guess he's strong and he does things that impress people, and that's enough. Just being likable and strong is enough to be a good leader, it seems, from Oda's perspective. And yeah, I'm very disappointed with that idea.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of covered a lot of it. I don't have much else like I can really add to it.
Yeah, because I know like I want to kind of harp on this a little bit because like I talked about this a few times a while ago. But the scene I keep coming back to is Water 7, the moment after the Usopp Luffy fight. You know, when he's walking back, and even though he's won the fight, you know, he's super down on himself and he's super unhappy with what's going on. And Zoro gives him that speech saying, you know, this is what it means to be a captain. You know, you have to make the hardest decisions, and you have to act as a leader. You have to act as a guidepost for the crew because we all look towards you for guidance. And if you are ever become unsure of yourself, if you ever, you know, for a moment show uncertainty or hesitation, then that reflects back on the crew. And it feels like after that, Oda's just like, well, I can't really act on this because Luffy's entire shtick is supposed to be that, you know, he's irresponsible all the time. And so we keep repeatedly, you know, each new arc, we just reset the clock where Luffy's like, all right, any lesson I would have learned from the last arc, I'm just going to pretend like it never existed, and we'll just keep repeatedly, you know, cycling through it. And it feels like for Oda, he's doing that because it's the easiest way to push the plot forward. Because it's like, all right, Luffy does something irresponsible. All right, we have tension. We have, you know, everything else. From this, I can start doing, laying out different plot threads. And I wish he'd kind of back away from that and try to challenge himself a little bit more because it does become really, really repetitive and predictable. In each new arc, you're like, all right, Law's going to say, you know, this is the plan, don't deviate from it. 2 seconds later, Luffy's going to be like, nope, deviating from the plan, we're just going to run full speed in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know, like, so far this Wano flashback, like, I don't know if it's better or worse, the idea that Oda feels like, you know, this is exactly what people love about the character, where it's like, all right, this guy just oozes machismo, you know, he's just a badass that goes around cutting up stuff. He doesn't give a shit about anyone else. You know, people will just love him just cause. And I don't know if that's me like, all right, the fact that Oda thinks this is the best way to portray it is bad, or if it should be like, all right, I don't know how to feel about that, but I don't know. I kind of hope that we're gonna get something else from the Slash because I know a lot of the counter arguments to the criticisms of this is like, all right, we don't have the whole picture yet. You know, every arc always gets better once you know where everything's going on, where all the pieces are. But it feels like even with this, like Oda isn't laying down the groundwork for this arc to be as good as the ones that came before it. But I don't know, anyone else have different thoughts on that?
Nah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem now is that we are. How long has this manga been running? I think that
years.
Yeah, I feel like at a certain
20 something years.
Yeah, I feel like at a certain point we gotta like just try to stray away from like stories like this because when I say like, hey, we have overthrow a guy, rescue princess, and I'm like these, yeah, it's tropey and stuff, but it's so it's kind of the formula sometimes One Piece does, and sometimes I kind of want to stray away from the formula, and that's the thing we've been reading this for however long we have respectively, and we've kind of know the kind of stories he can already tell. It's this now we're at a point where we're just expect something different or a little bit more variety. I don't know, and it's just it all kind of culminates together, and where it's just like we're to say if mixed bag is right for me at least, where I feel mixed on this entire thing now because it's just like, well, I kind of have an idea of how this is going to end, and I know it's going to add into the greater world of One Piece, but I kind of already want to get to there because I'm like I know this is going to mean something. He's going to be tied with Gold Ranger somehow. Everything's going to be tied together because that's how it always happens. So like, let's just get to there. I just want to get this done. That's where I'm at right now with it. I'm not against the entire thing. It's just like we know how this is going to end. There's not like, unless it's a swerve for the sake of a swerve, I'm not sure where where the story is gonna, where else can the story really go?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing with this, right? Where I'm thinking about like trying to think about where will the story go from here, and like Wano introduced so many interesting elements. Like we have the idea that Wano has a caste system, and I want to kind of just introduce that, and then you never touched it again. Even with this flashback, I talked about this in my reaction video I did for the last chapter. Like I talked about how the Oden flashback, like if he really wanted to showcase why this guy is not only a good leader, but why he's the right leader for Wano. You could have had him journeying through, the different districts and regions of Wano and meeting the Scabbards through his journeys through there, and then kind of showcasing, that even though Wano is based on Japan, it's like, all right, here's all the diversity that exists within Japan. It's not just the monolith that people think it is. And instead, Oda's just like, no, I'm just going to spend 5 seconds telling you about how this guy at 8 years old was visiting brothels and gambling because that's the most interesting aspect of his character. And I'm like, all right, really?
And
And
the
then the
fact
other,
that he's trying to get off the island as soon as he can.
yeah, exactly. Like I pointed that out to be like, all right, we know that Oden wants to get off the island, but we really don't know why, apart from, well, he just wants to go be an explorer. Like, all right, we know he admires pirates, but why does he admire pirates apart from, the generic thing of, well, all boys admire pirates and want to be like them. Like, there's so much Oda could mine there to kind of round out and develop this character. And he's just kind of tossing in his little bits of dressing, me like, all right, we're just gonna move on. And I don't know if that ties into the recent comments recently about, the editor saying One Piece is going to end in 5 years, and with all the health stuff Oda's going through. I don't know if that's part of the reason why Wano feels so rushed, is because it feels like, all right, we're in the end game now. Oda feels like he needs to start wrapping things up. So do you think that ties into the reason why everything feels so rushed right now is because Oda feels like he needs to start wrapping this up really quickly because he doesn't feel like he has enough time left to do it the justice he wants?
I could see that being a reason. I mean, I think most of us remember how things panned out with Bleach and with Kubo being given 5 weeks to wrap up his series.
Well, with Kubo, it wasn't like he was. So the story with Kubo is that actually he had health problems, and it just got to a point where he didn't want to continue the series. So the series was rushed to its ending, but that was sort of by Kubo's own choice.
I know. I'm more citing that as a more sort of extreme example, but yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I have brought up earlier in the stream that Wano does feel rushed, and definitely. I mean, even with a time frame of 5 years, Oda's already spinning a shitload of plates for this end game. So even I struggle to see how he would be able to wrap up all this shit in 200, 250 odd chapters from now.
Yeah, he has a lot of ideas, and he set up a lot of these plot threads and characters in motion, and I don't know if he really knows how to use all of them, or maybe he does have a sense, but it's like there's so much to do that he's really glossing over things that really feel like essential or would help the story. Like the big thing that's supposed to be Odin's big noble achievement in the flashback is that he cleans up Curry. Like it's this terrible place to live, filled with just ruffians, just the worst place in Wano, and then he makes it a livable place and improves the lives of everyone there. We don't even see it. We don't see how he actually does that. We are told in one panel that he does this.
Right.
And but we
Not
don't
even
actually
one
see
chapter,
how. Like,
one
how does
panel.
he actually clean this place up? What does that entail? Like, how does he go about rebuilding houses? How does he like make the land livable? Like, how did he actually do that? We are just told he does that, you know. So he like, for as much time as we have had spent with the Odin flashback already, it's like he's skipping over like the really essential part, showing like how he is actually developing relationships with these characters who are becoming subordinates, and then also how he is actually proves to other people that he is a man worthy of respect, that he is a leader that inspires confidence, and that, you know, is truly committed to helping other people and does genuinely help and improve other people. And so far, all we've seen are more examples of the opposite, like actually depicted on in the pages. And we're told about the other aspect of it, that he is actually helping people. So
Yeah, he just needs to stop introducing people. stop making characters. But let's focus on the ones we have and
don't give us, instead of giving us Big Mom's 35 fucking kids that
cool.
never.
I mean, they all have names. Congrats, dude. Like, wow, you have free time and like in a baby registry. I don't know. Like, what are you gonna? What does that mean for the long haul?
I mean, it's with Big Mom's family, it's less a case of a baby registry and more a confectionery book.
Yeah, see, that's the thing with like Big Mom's, like whatever, like 100 something family members, whatever, right? I remember fans being like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get all their names and everything. It's gonna be so cool to find out, all these designs and look at how creative Oda is and all that." And it's like, yeah, that's really great for like, world building, air quotes here, but what does it really add to the world other than saying, all right, Oda can come up with 100 new unique character designs? Like, we already knew that Oda's capable of doing something like that to an extent.
Yeah,
So, saying that this adds to the world building, it's like it really doesn't add anything unless all 100 of Big Mom's kids are going to have, an important role to play in the arcs going forward. And this kind of ties into like I think the last point I kind of want to talk about here is Reverie, because that was the other arc, even more so than Wano. We've heard about it since Alabasta, really, and it really came to the forefront back in Fishman Island with Hody's declaration that, I'm going to go up to Reverie and massacre all the kings, and make my statement. And then you have Fishman Island with Neptune being like, all right, this year is finally the year we're going to Reverie. We're going to, ask for Fishman Island to be brought up to the surface as a nation, ask for protection and all that. And Oda just glosses over it in like 2-3 chapters, and then gives us another small tidbit in during the Act 2 break for like half a chapter, being like, all right, more intrigue. And then he drops us straight back into Wano again. I'm like, all right, that frustrates me to no end, because to Doctor's point, it's like, all right, we already have all these established characters that we want to know things about, and yet he's taking us away from them to characters we don't really give a shit about. So I kind of want to ask your ideas. How do you feel about Oda having off-screen Reverie like the way he did?
It's a means to draw out the tension, and so the full big reveals of it are going to be at the end of the Wano arc, and I think that's like the idea of that. It's why we cut away from it right when it was beginning. And so it would have been interesting to see how the series would have read if we had like the big events of the Reverie first, and then got into Wano, and then all the stuff that we know and it's not the back of our mind during Wano, and then we're like waiting to come out of it and see how the Straw Hats react to that. But in this way, I guess because the Reverie in Wano is sort of happening concurrently, this is kind of we're kind of checking back in like as things happen or as things are announced, like with the whole dissolution of the warlords. But it's gonna be like it was like with in Thriller Bark, like we have the Ace and Blackbeard fight before that, and then Thriller Bark happens, and at the end, it's like, oh, news, Ace was beat by Blackbeard, and he's gonna get executed. So it's like that. It's just that structural again. It's like we don't show the results of of this big world changing thing that's happened until the end of an arc. Like it's just building up all this tension over a bunch of chapters before actually doing anything with it.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
I don't really know what to say, to be honest. I think you guys covered it all. And sorry, I'm back. I was out for a bit.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think my biggest pet peeve with it was that, we haven't seen Vivi since Alabasta. And then we finally had, like, Viola was kind of there during Dressrosa, and we really didn't see her do much. So I was kind of hoping that with Reverie, we'd kind of finally see them both in their element, playing the political game, having Vivi finally showcase her leadership skills. And you have Viola there who literally can read people's minds. And you think that would be like the most important ability someone could have in a conference where everyone is going to be lying to you. You have someone that can literally go and read people's minds.
God.
Is well versed in subterfuge and like seduction and all that. And Oda's like, no, we're just gonna off screen all of that for, Sanji peeping on women instead. Because that's what people really want to see. So I think like I get the idea of Oda being like, oh, I want to drop in these secrets, of what's happening with Reverie afterwards because Wano's isolated and you don't see the Straw Hats, hearing the news until everything's done. But it's like you don't hype up an event like that for years and then be like, all right, I'm just gonna off screen it and then we'll get to it, eventually.
Yeah, it's really disappointing because Oda could have done a really interesting arc just focused on all the secondary characters if he like showed the entirety of that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess he was not willing to break away from the Throts for that long, though. There've been several flashbacks that have done that already, so I don't understand how the Reverie would have been that much different. But
yeah,
I think we only saw what we the safe part, I guess, only showing the characters reuniting and fanboying over Luffy. But yeah, you're right. I mean, to be honest, I've never felt like we would see all of a Reverie, just because Oda loves to throw everything into mystery, and that's good if he makes it well. Like, for example, when he introduced Dragon in the flashback Reverie, and we of course didn't know who he was, but he was giving some hints about this person who is going to be really important and dangerous for the world later. But I feel like with the revelations we got in Reverie, it's like I've got one big fear, especially with and all this stuff about someone actually being on the throne. Because if anything, what I've always loved about the One Piece world is that it seemed like it had a real political side. As in, you got 20 kings that decided to make a country that would basically rule the world, and all that stuff that came from people who took decisions and decided to rule the world. So then you put me this person or this entity, or we don't really know what it is, and it seems like there's actually someone behind the scenes. And I feel like it kind of loses this human side that I really loved about the world government, because of course One Piece shows us this side from the pirates, or well, our good pirates, but it's not like the world government is all evil. Of course, it's got awful leaders, but at the end of the day, the Marines protect people too. So it's like Oda is just spinning this thing that used to be a bit gray more than evil and make it evil, and I'm not sure if I'm really behind that. So I don't really know how to feel about someone sitting on the throne that was supposed to be just a symbol.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of those points because this ties into something I should have actually brought up when I was talking about like Luffy and leadership earlier. But one of like my big worries or things I was kind of looking forward to seeing how Oda would handle it was one would be at Reverie with the idea of the kings and queens talking about it, is that the only really kind of piratical thing that Luffy has done that's actually been detrimental to the world was when he broke into Impel Down and he released all the level 6 prisoners
Yeah.
to get Ace out. And then later we see these prisoners going to the islands that were under Whitebeard's territory or wherever. We know that they're now making a huge mess there. They're now oppressing people. So it would have been interesting to see Oda tackle that with, Vivi and the others at Reverie talking about how great Luffy is, how he's a hero that goes around liberating countries. And you had other countries being like, hey, well, he broke into Impel Down. He led all these prisoners to escape, and now my country is so much worse off for what he did. And having to see them grapple with the idea of, all right, well, how do we actually deal with the fact that, Luffy did something like this? And this ties into ideas I've had with discussion we were talking about earlier with not finding out too much about Gold Roger. And this was one of the things I also liked Oda doing earlier, was showing the contrast between everyone that met him being like, yeah, Roger was my friend. He was a good guy, even if he was a little misguided and a little childish sometimes. But he had a good heart. He was a pure person, etc., etc. And then we saw it at the other end with someone like Squard saying, "Hey, Roger massacred my entire crew, just because someone made fun of him." I think it was either Raleigh or someone else did the same thing where he's like, "Yeah, Roger once killed the entire royal guard of a country because they made fun of his friends." So you're seeing kind of like the two dynamic sides of Roger. It's like, all right, you have Roger the hero and the friend to the people who knew him and who he was on good terms with. But then you also have the people that had to deal out with the fallout of Roger the Pirate King, this notorious person that kind of went around doing whatever he wanted, and he brought about this new pirate age. And in Fishman Island, we see that with consequences of slavery increased once Roger introduced the Golden Pirate Age. It's like, all right, now Fishman Island is dependent on other people for support. And I was kind of hoping that Oda would eventually deal with that, with Luffy being like, all right, Luffy wants to be the Pirate King. How is he going to deal with Roger's legacy when he eventually does want to overthrow the world government? And now seeing that, what Gabby's point of, there is someone on the empty throne, it feels like it makes it too easy to go, well, all Luffy has to do to make things right is go and punch Ym out and say, hey, I took out the big bad, world is now fixed, the Marines can do their good things. And it feels like it really does simplify a lot of what could have been a potentially more complex and interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he did that, to be honest. What's the goal? It's like kind of throwing everything he's built up so far. And I don't know, it's like, okay, why would people take orders from this person? We don't know if the Marines know he exists, right? Or they exist, right?
No, I don't know that.
Maybe only the celestial dragons.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. I hope we get some answers eventually, soon, not in 100 chapters.
Like the only thing I could think of for even defending the existence of Ym is because, again, another theory I've had for a long while is the idea that we've had all these different people that possess the initial of D, and you have someone like now we find out that Rox is also one of them, and we found out that with Whitebeard saying, well, Blackbeard is not really a D. So I wonder if Ym is someone that was from the ancient kingdom that also holds that initial but sold them out and then went on to help form the world government, become like the shadow leader. which is the only kind of reason I could see for Oda introducing someone. But this also
Yeah.
feels like Oda being like, oh, I need a surprise that readers won't keep seeing because this, this is the one comment of his, I can't remember if it was an SBS or an interview that I really don't like. It was where Oda's like, oh, I don't want readers guessing the
Yeah.
plot of my series because that makes it boring. So I always have to
That's
keep it
that's
interesting. And I'm
so
like,
silly.
it's so dumb. Like, it's,
That's because your story makes sense. That's why people can guess what's going to happen. There will always be insane people who can predict things. That's good.
Mhm,
The only different thing from other times is that with the internet you can say those things and those things will reach a wider audience.
mhm.
But it doesn't make sense to just make surprises because someone guessed what you were planning to make.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. And for me at least, it's very selfish and
Mhm.
shows so much stupid pride. That's just ridiculous to me, honestly.
Yeah.
It's
Or,
like you don't have faith in your story. You need to. I don't know. It's. I don't know.
so I want to kind of piggyback off that. Do you feel like, because we keep talking about how this distinct difference between the storytelling of pre-time skip to post-time skip, and I know there's also kind of like an influx of readers because I think Marineford was going on right around the time that Naruto was ending, was like in its final arc, and I was hearing there's like a lot of readers jumping ship from Naruto being like, all right, I need a new shonen to try out, and a lot of people are saying, hey, get into One Piece, it's in this big battle right now, it's super awesome. It was a discussion in which all the fans that jumped in at Marineford kind of got hooped in by, being like, oh, One Piece is like this all the time. It's all epic battles and big fights and huge
Mm.
spreads all the time. So curious, do you think that, you know, the feedback from newer fans like Marineford and onwards, feeding back to Oda's editors, influenced his decisions for storytelling going forward for post time skip?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I think his biggest change, at least for me, was when he was introduced to Game of Thrones, and that was around 2000. When was it? I think Greg mentioned it, mentioning how he made him
Yeah.
watch the first season. I don't remember when the first season was out, but I feel like there was a slight change in the approach for the storytelling for nations and all that stuff when he got introduced to it.
So, do you think that's
And I
probably
don't like it.
Actually,
the?
I had no idea.
Yes. Anyone else have any guesses for like why Oda's storytelling changed apart from that, or you think he's just started consuming different kinds of media and that kind of influenced the direction he took?
Another thing is that I feel like he just got old,
Mm.
and that some of the things that he didn't exactly believed, but I feel like he just became a Japanese old man, and he's just so stubborn with the stuff that he believes, like women shouldn't fight, or if they're pretty, you shouldn't beat them up.
Mm.
That he just can't make a difference there. Like, for example, one of his first comments when One Piece started was that people complained that Nami wasn't sexy enough. And I remember that there was an interview or something where he said, like, no, I don't make her sexy because I want people to remember her for her story and her personality.
Oh
And
boy.
you're like,
Yeah.
20 years later,
Mm.
and we see Nami getting dressed by Kinemon against her will, and she doesn't mind.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
what happened to that Oda? I feel like he just got old. It's just too stubborn to think that maybe the woman complaining about the portrayal of female characters in the series aren't something he should take account because it's a story for boys. So there's that. I hope, to be honest, I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like there should be, I don't know, a female mangaka or someone who could tell him, this is awful, please stop.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously his editors won't ever said something like that. Or I don't feel like Shonen Jump would complain about something like that.
Yeah. All right. So, yes, closing thoughts. Anyone have, ideas of either what you'd like to see in Wano or just general thoughts about, what you're looking forward to or anything else?
I want it to end. Sorry. I don't want to be bleak.
Yeah, me too. To be honest, yes. And how long has it been already? How many
It's
chapters?
been over a year. It started at
Roughly.
909.
Well, at least it's not Dressrosa long so far.
Yes.
It'll probably exceed Dressrosa length soon.
I mean, one thing that I'm hoping for or looking forward to, something that Ash has brought up on Twitter, in that I'm hoping that we get more of a Zoro-focused arc in relation to the lore of the swords, and obviously his personal development and his history. But obviously, I don't know where that could go. And as well, I mean, I do hope that we get that Kaido gets fleshed out before he gets taken down inevitably. What else? I'm not sure. Anyone else?
I would like to see Kaido get taken down in a group fight, not solo fight, please. Please. I don't think he should be beaten up so easily, but by just one person.
Yeah.
That's basically it, I guess. And
especially Big Mom there too, like.
Yeah, exactly.
The Emperor should not be taken out by just one.
One of my wishes also is I hope Big Mom doesn't become an ally. I hope she isn't redeemed, because I feel like that's where we are heading, because at least so far Big Mom seems like a big puppet from the people that she encountered instead of her own person. So I hope that if we find out at the end that maybe Mother Carmel is the one pulling the strings from inside her, or maybe Strusen made her crazy when they meet. I don't know. I hope she doesn't become suddenly a good person and becomes an ally for the Straw Hats. I hope that doesn't happen. I guess I want Kaido to die, mainly because I feel like this is what we're heading to, and that's Blackbird getting his devil fruit. So I feel like Kaido will probably die.
Yeah. Doctor, any thoughts?
It would make sense for his story to finally be killed like he always wanted.
Yep. I hope it's compelling, at least. I don't know. Guess we are heading to Elbaf after this.
That seems, because there's also this is another question I want to bring up. There's division among the fandom. Like, some people think that, Big Mom and Kaido, both their arcs are going to end on this island with both of them being taken out. And some people are thinking, no, Kaido will be taken out, and then Big Mom will follow the Straw Hats to Elbaf, and her arc will end there. So I'm curious where everyone else lands on the sides of that.
I mean, I think if that happens, I don't know, maybe. I think if that happens, though, it's going to be a bit of a major cop-out. At least that's the sense I'm getting.
Yeah, because the only way I can see that happening is like Big Mom getting her amnesia again, like towards the climax of the fight, and then switching sides from Kaido's forces to helping out the Straw Hats, and then like partying with them, and then she's like at the end she gets her memory back. She's like, "Oh, I have to be chasing the Straw Hats to Elbaf,"
Right.
Because I can't see them like fighting together on the same side, of like Big Mom Kaido fighting together. And unless Kaido also gets turned into an ally and then like Blackbeard comes in and kills him at the end, I can't really see how we're gonna have an arc for like Big Mom just standing by and waiting for like the Straw Hats to leave Wano before being like, oh, I guess I have to go with them to Elbaf. Unless
Mhm.
she also ends up an ally by the end of this arc and it's like, all right, I'm gonna go make things right with the Giants. But like Gabby said, I really don't want to see Big Mom redeemed and being like, oh, I'm a
Yep.
good person now. Please love me. Like,
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't want to see
how do you
that.
go from like eating kids to be like, oh, she's fun?
Also, this is a minor thing, but I hope we find out what Kaido actually is. Like, I know that the sort of scope of what qualifies as human is very broad in One Piece, and that's an aspect of the world building that I really like. But I do have to wonder if he's a giant and if he has any kind of connection to Elbaf. Because the thing with the horns, like, obviously we've got humans with long necks, we've got the double joints in the legs, double joints in the arms, but there's no really horned humans, I think. Not sure.
Mm,
This is where we're getting to
kind of
my
like horse.
yeah. This is where we're getting to my theory territory, where I've always been of the mind that Kaido is a chimera that was created by
Uh,
Vegapunk. Because we
uh,
back on Punk Hazard, we saw the horn symbol for like the Oars race on the gates to Punk Hazard. And
Oh.
if you look at Kaido's artificial island, like the mountains and the trees and everything he's created, and if you look at Punk Hazard before the explosion went off, it looks exactly like Punk Hazard did pre-explosion, and Kaido's artificial island looks exactly like that. So I
okay.
wonder if he was imprisoned or born on Punk Hazard, and he modified the artificial island to make it look like his home island, and that's where we have that whole thing coming from. And this kind of ties back into it because we now know during that reverie break, we know the Marines are going after the warlords, and we're seeing Vegapunk's new system. And he's the
Mhm.
one character that was mentioned, what, like 500 plus chapters ago in the series, and we still have not seen him yet. So I feel like we're gonna have to see Vegapunk introduced into the series sometime relatively soon, but there's like a whole bunch of ideas I have regarding that. But this also depends on if Wano's gonna end in 3 acts or if it's gonna end with 5 acts. I think that's still debatable.
Mm.
Yeah. Vegapunk is a wild card.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
I don't. I'm not really sure where we are heading.
I guess that's good. I mean, well, it's going to be a
You
surprise.
could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, when I was more into the series, like 2 years ago, I was always theorizing where we were heading, but now I'm just letting me be guided, I guess, because more than anything, I'm not really sure what is the purpose of this arc other than um, defeating Kaido.
yeah.
And I wonder what's the deal with this lady that married Odin and her could be coming from the past and all that stuff. I'm not sure what is the purpose of any of that, and what happened to her devil fruit. Because if she died, someone should have it, right?
Mhm. Yeah. I guess we'll have to hope to see what the answers to that are right now. I think the worst thing about Wano is I'm just like, all right, each chapter, I'm just like, all right, can we just get back to the interesting stuff like outside of Wano that I want to see? Because right now the only scabbard I really care about is Kiku,
Mm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
fandom is just like grinding me down on that with their transphobic stuff. Like
Oh,
I'm just
Oh my
hate
god.
that
Yeah.
so
Fun.
much. Because like I know like
Not surprised.
yeah, because I think I saw someone on Twitter mentioned that we might have already glossed over Sanji having met her and like having his expected freakouts. So I hope that that's what the case is, and we just
Mm-hmm.
completely skip over that. But like, I'm just not looking forward to what's going on with her because Oda's handling of the LGBT crowd like has been spotty at best. I'm like, all right, with Kiku, he's
It's not
doing.
even spotty. You're giving him too much credit by calling it spotty. All you gotta do is look at the Okama and the
Yeah.
kind of caricatures that he's turned that whole element was world building into.
Yeah.
Like, there's no respect there. There's no care. There's no
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because
Mm.
this is kind of awesome because this is also the other thing, right? Because Kiku's the first one where it's like, all right, he hasn't treated her as badly as the others yet. And like the only intrigue, like the one intriguing panel regarding her was that point where, oh, what was it? Hyogoro tells, the scavengers when they're in the mines or in the prison mine, take off your disguises and show them who you really are. And we have that moment of like everyone else like taking off their disguises, and you have Kiku putting
Mm.
on the Oni
Putting on the
mask, right?
mask.
And she's the
Mhm.
only one putting on a disguise. I'm like, all right, is Oda going to explore this? And this ties into, longer term theory ideas I've had about Crocodile's past with Ivankov, Crocodile potentially
Mhm.
being transgender. And I'm like, all right, if we get an arc with, Kiku and Croc, kind of tying into like Kiku finally leaving the island and potentially, finding Ivankov, that would be a great way for Oda to kind of go back
Wow.
on all his shitty representation up to this point and do something that's actually wholesome and heartfelt. But at the same time, like, do I really trust him not to
I don't.
majorly screw that up?
I'm
Really?
sorry, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like at this point, I'm just like, ah.
No, I don't.
Mm.
Um, depends on if Sanji will have that moment or not, I guess. But
Yeah.
I
want,
don't trust
if
on
Sanji
this.
has that moment, I just want all the scabbards to gang up on him and just beat the crap out of him, being like, you know what? Don't keep this part of our family. You're not
Fuck
going to
you.
talk to her like that, and just beat the shit out of him. That would make me so
Yeah.
happy. That'd be like the only conclusion I'd be happy with is just them wailing on him. But
Yeah, and not just wailing on him, they just outright hate him after
yeah,
that
Yeah.
for
everyone
good.
on
Like
after that, they're
no
all just like
forgiveness.
completely giving him the cold shoulder and being like, "You can fuck off, man. We don't need your help. Just go over and hide in the corner."
Yeah.
I don't know, because let's
So
talk
good.
this because
Like we could do a whole discussion just shitting on Sanji.
oh
That would be nice.
yeah, I have to do something like that eventually. But oh no, I was gonna say something else. But no, curious because this also ties into like the warlord stuff. Because which warlords do you think will get away from Vegapunk's new weapon? If any of them will get away.
Oh. I'm positive Hancock will be fine.
Hmm.
But mostly because she's a pretty woman. And they sent Kobe to get her instead of getting Buggy and Alvida, who he has a story with. But okay, I feel like she's going to be fine. Buggy is probably going to be fine too because it's his Buggy. Yeah, the rest maybe Mihawk, but I'm more interested in seeing that how that's going to play out. Are they going to become just pirates who will riot, or will they stay neutral?
Yeah, because I keep trying to toss out my theories on here, but because we've talked about Weevil, like Weevil is the one curious case I'm wondering about. Because by the time he was introduced into the story, the warlords weren't really relevant to it anymore. Because Doflamingo was the last warlord we were ever going to fight in the series. So to me, it's like, all right, why is Oda introducing this new weirdo into it? Why is he making him a warlord and claiming he's Whitebeard's son? And so I'm wondering if he's going to show up in Wano at some point, especially because we're now dealing with, Whitebeard's past in the flashback to Oden and everything else. So I wonder if we're going to see a history of what exactly happened, like who Weevil is, and if he actually is Whitebeard's son, or if he's going to be, he's going to play some kind of role in the past. and we're going to see what his connection to the future is, because we've also got two other characters tied directly to Whitebeard, being Crocodile and Bonnie, both of who have mysterious pasts. So I'm curious if Oda's also going to tie them into this arc to kind of wrap up Whitebeard's storyline, finally once and for all. And if we're going to see that, because I know we're talking earlier about, Momonosuke not being participating in the battle because he's too young. But if Bonnie shows up and she's able to age up Momonosuke into a full-sized adult, that would make Wano vastly more interesting to see Luffy riding on a full-grown Dragon Momonosuke in a smile form, facing off against Kaido in like an aerial battle.
That'd be cool. Though I feel like I don't want any more new characters to just pop up in the arc. Because there's already so many characters already. I feel like Whitebeard stuff should be saved. Whitebeard and Weevil stuff that should be saved for after this. They should leave Wano and go to another place where that character can finally be explored, and other characters can be explored. But I feel like we have enough people in this arc already that need to have payoffs for their stories.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, how many arcs do you all think there are left? Because this is also a debatable point. Like, some people are saying they want kind of a return to, like the mini arcs we had before. There's the Straw Hats go on like a little side adventure before they get into, like a real massive, like world-changing, plot-changing arc. But given like how Oda's going through Wano thus far, and like just given the 5-year estimate and stuff, I don't feel like we have a lot of time left for, fun little side arcs anymore. So I feel like from here on out, we're just going to get Elbaf, search for the last poneglyph, final war, and that'll be it. I'm curious if anyone else thinks that we'll get like something else in between, because I can't really see the warlords and stuff like being dealt with in a mini arc outside of, because it feels like that's a step backwards scope wise after the Straw Hats have taken out the first emperor. I'm curious if anyone else has different thoughts on that.
No, yeah, logically I agree with that. I think the main arcs going forward are going to be Elbaf, Raftel, and then the final war, whatever that entails. And any shorter stuff between that would probably be chapters you can count on the fingers of one hand. Kind of like the Reverie chapters that we've had recently, just like 2 or 3 chapter bursts.
Maybe he even covers them in the cover stories instead of the actual chapters. Because it's a lot, but it would lose focus on the main story that is so important right now. So if we're seeing Oden, and it seems like we will get more secrets about Roger and Whitebeard and all that stuff from 30 years ago, then I feel like and given that it's Oda, I feel like he will tie that for the next arc and for the final in Raftel. So that's why we are getting such a detailed flashback for Oden. It's a good chance to finally flesh out a bit Roger, at least. I wish we get more cooler designs for women, but that's just wishful thinking from me. Because how is Toki? Toki looks just like Robin and Kiku and everyone.
God,
Yeah. I guess everyone is a descendant of her since she's from the original kingdom, and that's why every girl looks the same.
Yeah,
I agree that we will get only like 3 arcs more, especially if the news about One Piece ending in 5 years, though I feel like it will be like 7, not 5. Because One Piece has about 30 chapters a year, right? With all the breaks, all that takes. So that would be how many? 150 chapters for the end. I don't see that happening at all.
No, it's not happening.
Yeah,
Mm.
I imagine this whole second half of the series, all this New World stuff onwards, would be as long as the first half. So, in my mind, I always figure the series is going to end around 1,200 chapters. So, 250 more chapters at the very least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope everyone has a good time.
I want to say the same stuff that Rayleigh said when Roger died. That it was the day I laughed the most, I cried the most, and
Yeah.
drank the most when One Piece ends.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah, I think at the end, no matter how it ends, I'll definitely drink the most. We'll see about the crying and the laughing after I read the chapter.
I hope Shueisha does some for that time. There's a way to stop leaked chapters, so
Oh boy, yeah, I don't
we
want
get
to
to
imagine.
experience it at the same time all around the world and not get awful spoilers like Naruto and Bleach got when they ended. I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every
I
YouTuber
hope.
has like a screenshot of the end page every on their
Uh-huh.
thumbnail.
I hope if that happens, they should get arrested.
Yeah, honestly, I'm
Yeah.
probably gonna just have to be off all social media once we get near Endgame because people will just be spoiling it left, right, and center. Be like, oh my
Yeah,
God, I can't believe X character died. I'm gonna be like, oh God, yes, thank you.
yeah. I think it's going to be such a massive event that maybe even Shueisha won't let the chapter be published in the magazine.
Oh
Only
yeah.
only leave it like a digital version or
Mhm.
something, because otherwise it'll be a really bad event.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it feels like they'll have to do something like crack down really, really
Yeah.
hard on piracy or something because like end game One Piece, like there's gonna be so much spoilers flying around. There's gonna be so much anticipation.
Mhm.
Like the fandom's really gonna be in an uproar when those chapters start dropping.
It's really going to be unprecedented because I mean it's the absolute top-selling property that they've had. Well, a top-selling manga period. So
Mhm.
They'll
yeah.
have to take measurements. Yep.
Yeah. All
Sure.
right. So closing thoughts, everyone.
Uh, One Piece was all right. I think I feel like a lot of this discussion allowed me to kind of better grasp an idea of what this arc Wano is, and
Mhm.
I can't say I'm not necessarily still disappointed, but I am still at least I would say slightly more positive on it than I was probably getting into it. At least before we started talking about it. I mean, as much as we ragged on a lot of stuff, I feel like some of this discussion needs to be had to some degree.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so, uh, but no, I think I kind of just want to see where this goes. I think that's just how I'm at. What I am too far into One Piece to like say that.
To drop it.
Well,
Yeah.
not really. I mean, I have on occasion dropped the series because I just was not enjoying what was going on. Stuff during Dressrosa, stuff during Fishman Island.
Uh-huh.
There were points in the series, like I mentioned earlier, that I was 2 years behind on the series and only just recently caught up, like a couple months ago. But
Yeah.
it's like at least now I have like, okay, this feels like what I enjoyed from this series. I just hope they find a way to make it come together in the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
Hmm. Um, I hope for the best. I know people can think that I don't like One Piece or that I'm too harsh on it, but I read a lot of manga, and really One Piece is of the best ones I've read. And if I compare it to something, I compare it to itself, to the first half of the story. And I do think that it was stronger because I care a lot about character work. So I think Oda still has it in him to develop his character. So I just hope that it happens, that the Straw Hats are no longer left aside, and we actually get a reason to care about them in the final arc. So I just hope for the best and hope that this story with Odin pays off, because it really, the whole arc depends on this flashback, and I hope it has a nice ending, like much like Skype did with the flashback with Calgara and Noland. I really hope it pays off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I've ragged on One Piece and Oda during this discussion, it is a series that's close to my heart, and that's been in my life for going on 17 years. So obviously, I'm like holding on to hope for a fulfilling ending, and obviously, I want it to be as good as it can be, and that's why I rag on it as much as I do.
Yeah. Liam, any thoughts?
I basically will echo everyone else's sentiments. I feel like One Piece has been lost too much in its world building and sacrificed its characters in the process. I'm hoping as we move towards the end of the series, Oda reconnects with the stories of the Straw Hats and actually, progresses and concludes those stories in a meaningful way and kind of really touches base with that. And there's a lot of different plot threads dangling. There's a lot of different things that need to be addressed by the end of the series. So I'm hoping that Oda will follow through with all those ideas and it'll reach that satisfying conclusion. I don't want any character, especially any Straw Hat, to feel like they have been left behind, like in so many long-running series characters happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going everyone else, like, despite my misgivings with what's happened in Wano so far, I still think it has the potential to make up for it in the back end. Like, there's still so much that we don't know about this arc. There's still so much to explore. So I hope Oda does dive into it, and I hope that because he really is kind of experimenting in this arc in a new way with kind of like the act breaks to kind of break it up and give it a little bit more breathing room. So I'm hoping that, because it's following like the Kabuki play, we are having kind of like this little build up to that climax before we get the big fallout from it. I think more than anything, I really, really hope that this arc has a conclusion to one of the arcs that I've been hoping for the longest while is Tashigi's arc. Please, please, please give her something.
Don't give me hope, Ash, please.
I've been waiting 800 chapters. Give me something. But I don't know. Like, I can't help but hope for, like hoping to see the best in this arc with everything that's been laid out. But I don't know. I don't know what to really expect from it. But like everyone said, I can't really see myself giving up on the series. I have been with it for so long. It is really close to me, despite, how much I endlessly criticize and talk about it. But definitely do love, getting together with other fans like you guys on streams like this, because I think it does kind of help me at least get a more positive overall outlook compared to what I'm just reading about myself week to week and not really discussing on forums and things. So I think this really helps a lot. And yeah, maybe we'll try to do more of these in the future if possible. But yeah, no matter what, I think I talked about this on Twitter a few times, and I'll probably reiterate it here. No matter what, when the series ends, I do want to get together, with all my friends that I found through the series and throw a big party for it and send it off, no matter what my thoughts on it are at the end. But yeah, really glad to do this, and I think we'll probably cut it off here. So if everyone kind of wants to just give, their Twitter handles, if you want to plug something, we can go ahead and do that now.
I don't have much to plug, but my Twitter handle is Church of Wolves. Had a great time on this stream. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Anyone else wants to go next?
Sure. Well, guys, you can find me at Yamineftis. I'm a fan artist. I am more into haiku right now. Really, but I still love One Piece. Although I don't really talk much about it nowadays because I don't want One Piece stands coming at me. But I love the series. I draw for it a lot, and you can find my art at Gabi Arts on Tumblr and also at my Twitter, Yamineftis. I also have a Haikyuu podcast with Ash.
Yep.
We talk about the manga and are very excited to watch the anime, the return of the anime from
Yes,
January on.
January. Yes, looking forward to
After
that.
3 years. 3 years. Yes.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right. Loom, Doctor, either one of you?
Let me want to go.
Oh, sure. You can find me at Lum Ramayasha, and you can check out my podcast, the Manga Mavericks podcast, at manga_mavericks, and it's available on every podcast platform of choice. And we did a One Piece episode a few years ago with Sam Leach from the One Piece podcast, so you can check that out if you want some more One Piece discussion.
It's a fun podcast. Check it out.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, like I mentioned before, I'm Doctor from the Ass Backwards Anime Podcast. You can find me over at ssaapodcast.com. That's the main show. I also run several other ones, including Just a Gintama Podcast over at gintamapodcast.com. One Podcast Prevails over at onepodcastprevails.com, which is a Detective Conan Case Closed podcast. I also run a wrestling music podcast called Tune Sweet over at tunesweet.me. And there's a bunch of stuff on my Patreon, patreon.com/SSAA network, which includes the Poltergeist Report, where it's me going through Yu Yu Hakusho for the first time.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
So it's that, several the project that I mentioned called Jumping Through 2017, which was me going through my entire backlog of Jump, among other things like Patreon exclusive reviews. I think we just did one on Over the Garden Wall and Go Shogun, the Time Ranger. All of that's on our Patreon, various different tiers and stuff like that on there. Poltergeist Report is just for like $1. You can actually get into that one. Yeah, that's kind of it. And if you want to follow me on Twitter at SSAA Podcast. There you go. I have a lot. Sorry. I'm a very busy person.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and with saying useless Ash, I think everyone that's watching the stream probably knows where to find me and everything else, but I'm glad you all tuned in. I hope you had as much fun as we all did recording this. Until next time, I'll talk to you all later.